From the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin's message is blunt. The war in Ukraine could end tomorrow if Kyiv surrenders the Donbas. He demands Ukraine recognize Russia's control over the entire Donbas region, claiming it's historically Russian and its people have chosen Moscow. This narrative, repeated daily on Russian state TV, ignores the brutal reality. Fighting never stopped, and Russia's control is far from total. Putin's demand is an ultimatum, not a negotiation. He wants Ukraine to give up sovereign land, setting a dangerous precedent for the world. If borders can be changed by force, international law and national sovereignty are at risk. The Kremlin frames the war as a defense against NATO and a mission to protect Russian speakers, but it's about restoring influence and justifying the war's cost. For Ukraine, this is impossible. President Zelensky insists Ukraine's borders are not up for negotiation. Surrendering Donbas would mean abandoning millions of citizens and betraying those who died defending their land. Ukraine's position is clear. Peace cannot come by sacrificing territory. They demand a just peace, one that restores all of Ukraine's internationally recognized borders, including Crimea and Donbas. For both sides, the price of peace is nothing less than the future of Ukraine itself. Russia claims near total control of Donbas, but the reality is a stalemate. Moscow holds all of Luhansk and about 70% of Donetsk, but the remaining 30% is a fortress, Ukraine's most fortified region. The Donbas fortress belt is a dense web of trenches, bunkers, and minefields, built and reinforced for over a decade. Layered defenses mean that if one line falls, another stands ready, turning every advance into a costly slog. Ukrainian artillery is pre-sighted, making any Russian assault a deadly gamble. This is why the front lines barely move. Every kilometer is paid for in blood. The Donbas fortress belt is anchored by cities like Pokrovsk, Kramatorsk, and Sloviansk, symbols of Ukrainian resistance. These cities are command centers and supply hubs, essential for Ukraine's defense and Russia's ambitions. The battle for Bakhmut showed the cost of Russia's advance, tens of thousands of casualties for a city in ruins, while Ukraine withdrew to new defenses. It was a Pyrrhic victory for Russia, draining its forces for little gain. Avdiivka, another key city, became a fortress. Russia's massive offensive there led to staggering losses and only a partial Ukrainian withdrawal. Now, Russia targets Chasiv Yar, a city on strategic high ground. If it falls, the path to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk opens. But Chasiv Yar is heavily fortified, promising another bloody fight. These battles prove Ukraine's strategy, make Russia pay dearly for every inch. The cost for Russia is immense, and the fortress cities remain defiant. As long as these strongholds stand, Russia's advance is stalled. The fight for Donbas is a war of attrition, and Ukraine is making it count. Donbas is more than land, it's the key to the war. For Russia, controlling Donbas means a land bridge to Crimea, access to resources, and a propaganda victory for Putin. Militarily, it's a launchpad for further advances west or south, threatening the rest of Ukraine. For Ukraine, holding Donbas is about survival. Every day the fortress belt holds, it protects cities like Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia. Losing Donbas would cripple Ukraine's economy and national identity. The people in Donbas are Ukrainian citizens. Abandoning them is unthinkable. The fortress belt ties down huge Russian forces, preventing attacks elsewhere. If Ukraine loses this ground, Russia could redeploy troops and escalate the war. Holding Donbas preserves the front line and buys Ukraine time to rebuild strength. The fight here is for the future of Ukraine as a sovereign nation. Donbas is the linchpin. Lose it, and the entire defense could unravel. The war in Donbas has been catastrophic, especially for Russia. By late 2025, Russian casualties, killed and wounded, have surpassed 500,000, the highest since World War II. Russia's meat assault tactics send waves of poorly trained soldiers into fortified Ukrainian lines, resulting in horrific losses for minimal gains. The economic toll is crushing. A third of Russia's budget now goes to war, forcing cuts in healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Sanctions have isolated Russia from the global markets and technology, pushing its economy to the brink. Russia's material losses are staggering. Thousands of tanks and armored vehicles destroyed, many irreplaceable. The military is now relying on outdated equipment, degrading its capabilities for years to come. What was meant to be a swift victory has become a war of attrition, draining Russia's men, money, and machines for devastated land. If this continues, Russia's ability to launch major offensives will collapse, and internal instability could follow. The Kremlin gambles it can outlast Ukraine and the West, but the cost keeps rising. The The longer the war drags on, the greater the risk of a strategic defeat for Moscow. Peace talks always stall on one-issue territory. Russia demands Ukraine recognize its sovereignty over Crimea and all annexed regions, including Donbas, a non-negotiable starting point. This is not a peace offer, but a demand for surrender and acceptance of borders redrawn by force. Ukraine, devastated but defiant, insists on a just peace based on the UN Charter full Russian withdrawal to 1991 borders. For Kyiv, giving up land would only invite future aggression and undermine sovereignty. This deadlock is fundamental. Ukraine fears ceding territory would set a precedent for more demands. President Zelensky's peace formula starts with restoring territorial integrity, rejecting appeasement. Some in the international community suggest a land for peace deal, but Ukrainians see this as a false choice. They believe surrendering Donbas would only lead to a temporary ceasefire, with Russia regrouping for another attack. For Ukraine, the battle for borders at the negotiating table is as vital as the fight on the front lines. The stakes are national survival and the principle that might does not make right. Until Russia withdraws, Ukraine will not concede. Ukraine's refusal to surrender Donbas is about survival and identity. To give up Donbas would mean accepting that a powerful neighbor can dictate Ukraine's fate. For Ukrainians who have sacrificed so much, this is unthinkable. The Donbas fortress belt is a symbol of national will and resistance. As long as it holds, Russia cannot achieve its goals. The war has become a costly quagmire for Moscow, draining its military and economy. Putin's legacy now hangs on a war he cannot win or abandon. Ukraine's stand in Donbas is a message their sovereignty is not for sale. The fight for Donetsk is about the right of nations to exist and defend their borders. As Ukrainian soldiers hold the line, the dream of a free Ukraine endures. For Russia, Donbas is becoming a graveyard for imperial ambitions.